want there to be more? Don't you believe there has to be more?
I don't know. I mean, we're sitting here watching a beautiful sunrise on ancient ruins. The trees, the birds, the clouds. Real life is also pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree, real life is pretty amazing. And so is this show. And as we come to the closing of Undone with episode 8, I have to admit I was very, very happy to have partaken in the journey with Alma. To go through the experiences that not only this character had, but all the other characters affecting her as well. And I am very happy with the way this story ended. And it was a really, really touching story. And although this last episode is titled aptly That Halloween Night, which probably is the best way to say it from a plot point of view, I think another way of explaining this episode would be something like belief or my acceptance. And so, yeah, it's an interesting episode, and I can understand why many of the people were asking me, have you seen episode 8 yet? Have you seen episode 8 yet? Because it does close in a very interesting way. It's a way that I didn't expect, but it's a way that I'm very happy that they did. And it's something that makes me backtrack on a comment that I said previously, that I hope that they continue on with this series because we would like to see more of what happens to Alma. But the way it ended, I do not think it's appropriate for it to continue to go on. Sure, I would like to see what happens to Alma. But the way it portrayed the episode, which then portrayed this entire series, would actually possibly get, made smaller if additional episodes were brought out. And the reason I say that is because of why I feel that it would be more appropriate to call it, belief or my acceptance. It's because of the fact that this episode doesn't bring in closure. It doesn't. What it does provide, though, is the ability for each and every viewer to create their own closure. And by so doing, create the series in what they believe is the most appropriate way to end. And I got a feeling that this series may have caused some frustration to some people who wanted the series to explain everything to them, to get closure so that they can enjoy that, oh yes, this is the way it ended. But it actually doesn't do that. It doesn't, I'm not sure what's the best way. It doesn't hold your hand to give you the story, to spoon feed it to you. But what it does is give you the freedom and the sophistication to be able to interpret the story in whichever way you feel. And so there are many questions that come up, of which the main one is, well, was what Alma was experiencing real? And the answer to this is, make your choice. And that is the feeling that I get. This isn't one of those questions where it's like, we won't tell you and it'll always be a mystery. I feel like it is made to give each one of the viewers the interpretation and the freedom to say whether they feel Alma's experience was real, her capabilities were real, or that it was all a figment of her imagination. It's not like, for example, something like the Joker, where you're not really sure. What it does is say, yes, you may not be sure, but being sure wasn't the point of the entire story. Being, what do you believe? What do you want to feel is the end? And if that's the case, this story gives enough story to be able to end it in whichever way you want. And because of that, I feel that this is one of the most sophisticated stories in many ways that I've seen, because it gives the audience the freedom to be able to do so. Now, if people want full closure, then they may get very upset with Undone because of the fact that they felt like they watched this entire series without giving a satisfying ending to it. But from my perspective, I found that this was very good because of the fact that it gives the possibility for people who are watching to interpret it in whichever way they want. And that doesn't just mean in terms of capability, it also means in terms of personality of all the people that have come along. And then what is interesting is, of course, when you think about it in terms of real life, nothing is ever answered to you in any given way, right? I mean, even if there is closure on a certain situation, you're always wondering, because of the things that happen during the situation, that it closed a certain way doesn't always mean that that is the right way to close. I mean, if the situation had been different, it may have closed a different way. I mean, we all think about it going, well, if this happened in my life, maybe this would have happened better. Or if this happened in my life, this would have been far worse, right? Sometimes you will thank the Lords that certain things happened a certain way, and because of that, you know, things didn't go devastatingly bad. Or the other way is, maybe if I had realized to do things different, things might have gone differently. And so this story kind of reflects that. It gives you enough to make you feel like, okay, the other side has equally as much weight. But this isn't about which is right, you know. This is more about, what do you believe? And are you open enough to understand that sometimes, although you believe in this direction, it may not be everything that, you know, is expected. Other people's points of view on a different ending may be just as well created using the situations that happened in the story. And I thought that that was very, very interesting. Now, if you notice, you know, I'm not going over the plot too much, and I'm not really going to, because of the fact that I think this is especially this episode is something that you should watch and experience yourself to be able to determine that. By me narrating certain parts of the story without narrating the full series may give and skew the story in a certain direction, which may cause people to think that's the way the story should end. But there are certain points that I will bring up. There is a revealing point with regards to the father. And both Emma and the father experienced that what they thought they were trying to do and what they hoped they could accomplish to change the things to the father's death wasn't the case. And in fact, the father will say later on that maybe it's better for him to be deceased rather than to, you know, try to experience this entire situation. And I could see it from the perspective of the father, you know, saying it that way. And I could understand why Alma said what she did to say that that's not the case. And this all falls in line with a lot of the personalities that comes up. And again, it's a matter of the belief that you believe in and the acceptance that comes along with the other people's points of view and actions that they did, which may have caused situations that may be different from what you hoped for. And this closure is very interesting, and closure may be another way of titling this, is there is closure to a lot of things, even the sister's situation. There is a closure. I won't go into what that closure was, but I will say that she probably does grow significantly in the experiences that she had going all along. And what's interesting is at the end of the episode, the sister who has been somewhat superficial and also confrontational to a lot of the things Emma was doing was probably the most supportive character to the situation that Alma was in at the very end. And the conversation that I thought that those two had was really, really touching. Excuse me. And so I found this to be very interesting. I understood why the mother was the certain way. I understood why the father was the certain way. And this is another one of the situations between belief and acceptance. There is a belief that the mother has, and we see it throughout the entire time. And thank God we had episode 6 where we saw it through the mother's eyes and saw it as the pains that she was seeing through the situation that fate was giving her that was confronting her beliefs. And then we also see it through the father's eyes, of seeing what happened to his mother, right? Alma's grandmother, and why he's so determined to go in a certain direction. And later on, how he questions whether that commitment to that direction was a proper one. And the answer is not no. The answer is not yes. The story doesn't give you the ability to make that statement. You can if you want to. Just like you could say Iron Man was correct in Civil War or Captain America was correct in Civil War and make a lot of statements according to that, although the story was never about that, right? And so these sorts of situations always intrigue me because of the fact that life often gives a situation where it's not about who is correct, who is right, who is wrong. It's about a point of view of what one person believes and what one person doesn't. And sometimes it's important to stick to your beliefs, and sometimes it can be devastating to do so. As much as it looks like it is the fault of the father, it is one of those karma situations again where the mother and her commitment to her belief and the unwillingness to bend to the belief of what she had versus what the husband had as much influence to the death of the father as the father's actions. And yet the mother doesn't realize it because of the fact that, the actions were directly related in terms of what the father did, but indirectly related in terms of what the mother did. So whenever it's an indirect relationship, it's always one of those things where you could skew it out and say, I wasn't that, it wasn't me. I didn't do anything with regards to that. But the story shows how individual personalities and either their willingness or their lack of willingness to accept can cause controversial situations. The counter of that would be Sam. Sam is willing to accept all of what the outside pressure is trying to do. And because of that creates a tremendous amount of conflict between her and Alma. And then there's Alma's side, where she is absolutely headstrong into wanting to believe what she does. And in some ways, that's in character because despite the difference in viewpoint, whether you want to be bold and adventurous like the father, or whether you want to be conservative and safe like the mother, their headstrongness to their beliefs caused a significant amount of conflict. And that headstrongness is focused and characteristic of Alma. What's interesting is at the end of the episode, the sister, Becca, gives the opposite side, which is very forgiving or very accepting of other situations. It may not be what she feels or what she believes in, but she is willing to flow with what Alma is feeling because of the fact that she feels that that's probably best for Alma. That's something that, for example, the mother, no matter what happens, cannot accept, right? Cannot do. Is even if it will kill Alma, she will protect Alma even if it will kill Alma. That is the way I always felt about the mother. And so rather than plot and who's at right or who's at wrong, this is a very character-driven story. And because of that, I like this very much. If you were looking for a mystery story that will solve the problem and do Agatha Christie style of, telling you what the final verdict is, then you're going to be disappointed with this story. But if you understand that this isn't a story about a inline plot, a very narrow plot that you follow and then you finally know the answer, but rather a set of roads that you are given a chance to witness. A road that is viewed by Alma in her life, a road that is viewed by her mother in her life, a road that is viewed by Sam in his life, and of course by the father in his life. And each one of these people are trying to do their very best in thinking what they believe in is the best situation for what's going on. Then you understand why their actions go the way they do. And when those roads cross and when there is a conflict in the flow, then there is turbulence in the in the air. And that is what it's trying to show. And it's not trying to answer which road is correct, but it does give us the ability to show every road and then let us choose our feelings to how this road will end. But what I like about this is because each one of these roads was given with such passion, with understanding what the pains and the actions were to try to overcome the pains and learn it through the eyes of Sam, through the eyes of Becca, through the eyes of the mother, through the eyes of the father, and of course, most of all, through the eyes of Alma, that you understand why there is so much compassion in every one of the conflicts that goes on. This isn't a superficial sort of, each person is there just to move the plot along. Each one gives a very character depth interaction. And I remember in the very first episode, I was saying I was hoping that this series doesn't get lost in the plot by sacrificing the human interaction and the bonding that's going on. And I can say now, watching the very last episode, that they didn't. That they, in fact, may have made people who were hoping that the plot will get strengthened so that the road will become clear, a disappointment. But to me, I really like it because it gives us the freedom to choose whichever road that we want to go through. And it shows us, no matter which road we choose, just how much compassion there was by the individuals of the story. So this is a very sophisticated story in many ways, and may not satisfy a lot of people because the flavor is not singularly focused. But I like that because of the fact that that gives us the ability to try out the different flavors of the different personalities and the different beliefs, and then let us determine how much we are, as viewers, are willing to accept each one of these individuals as being another understandable persona in the way they acted versus, maybe these people should have done it this one way or the other. So that is my interpretation of Undone without trying to go into the details of that. And I like the fact that that gives us the lack of closure because, to be honest, that's what life is. When I turn off this video, this microphone, and when you turn off this video, you don't look at life and go, now I understand everything of what's going to go on in the future. Everything of what we know that will happen is about as clear as what we had when we started this whole adventure. And in many ways, it's trying to reflect a lot of the mysteries of life in that way, that once you get a lot of answers, doesn't solve the mystery, it just gives you some clues to show us just how great the mystery can be. So if you are an adventurer of understanding mysteries and realizing that mysteries aren't always going to be solvable, then this is a story that's very worthwhile to watch. But if you are looking for a story that wants to give you a very clear, cut and dried story where you know what the mysteries are and what you hope for is by the end of the series, those mysteries will be solved so that you know exactly how to interpret the story, then that's, I think, not going to be the case with Undone. If there is anything that I could relate it to, let me give you an example. In the Shinto religion, for example, there is thought. In Japan, the Shinto religion believes that God is everywhere and it's in everything. And because of that, you can interpret anything to be God. And because of that, every shrine has a different persona of God. You can make God a historical figure. You could make God a legendary figure. You can make God an element of the environment. You can make God a feeling such as love or courage. And it has its embodiment of that. But each shrine will not show the statue of the embodiment of that shrine. The statue is the belief and the vision that that shrine itself has, but understands that every person has their own vision of even that embodiment of that specific shrine. So they hide the statue and only give the basic understanding of what that shrine is respecting and believing in. And by doing so, it gives every person who comes to, pay their respect at the shrine and pray at the shrine, their ability to vision their own vision. And by doing so, each one of the people gets their own creation and completion of what their image of their belief is. And that is what I feel in many ways Undone does. Whatever way you want to say the story, is Alma's power true? Is Alma's power not true? Was the mother right? Was Alma right? Was father right? How does this interpret everything? Was everything a figment of the imagination? Or is part of it a figment of his imagination? Or is all of this real? That isn't answered. And in many ways, that doesn't matter, because the series isn't telling you this is how it is. The series is asking you, how do you want to end this story? Anyway, I've said enough as it is. And yeah, I am very grateful for you following all of this series. I am really happy to have had a chance to watch Undone, and I appreciate all the comments that you have provided. And one great big thank you. Nobody, not a single person, spoiled the story. And I want to thank you for that. Okay, so this is the end of Undone, but it isn't, because I think there is one more episode that goes over the making of Undone, and I may make an episode on that. And once this is closed, then I'll try to see what other things that I may be interested in looking at. There's no promise that what I will watch next will be in any way, shape, or form similar to the themes of the story that Undone does. For the next series, for all I know, it may be a kid show, it may be a slasher, thriller, it may be a comedy. I have no idea. But I appreciate you watching and following through this, and I hope you enjoyed the videos. But in any case, I'll try to make one more video after watching the making of Undone, and I hope you join me at that time. And until then, yeah, happy adventuring, happy believing, and as always, have a nice day, everyone.